Hello, Garland Nixon here with Dr. Jim Kavanagh. And of course, I'm going to call it the Blinken Sullivan administration has screwed up everything. I guess this is going to be a long show, but not really. Let's talk. Hello, Garland here with my dear friend and a brilliant man, a writer, a professor, and all that kind of stuff. I guess retired professor and all that good stuff. Dr. Jim Kavanagh, Dr. Kavanagh, Dr. Kavanagh. Do we have some things to talk about? Plenty. Things are pretty screwed up in this country, but let's start. I want to get your thoughts on this. Your thoughts on the Trump assassination. We'll start with this before we get into just briefly your thoughts on everybody's like people. I know people who are looking at it and they're like, yeah, there's no question they tried to rub him out. They tried, that was it. The CIA, whoever tried to take him out. And then there are people looking at it like, nah, it was just a crazy wild kid. But they're, I don't know. I try to be a rational person. But man, there's some weird questions that you got to look at, and you got to say, is that incompetence? Is that, and what the hell? Guy wandering around with a freaking ladder, crawling around on the building, and people are like, hey, there's a sniper in the building. And they're like, yeah, whatever. We got things to do. Jim.
I just published today on my Substack article about it last night. In fact, it's going to be paywall for a couple of days, but called Best Not Miss, which is a line from The Wire, from Omar. If you go after the king, best not miss. And that's the problem they have now. Look, nobody really knows what's going on. This is always the problem. Everybody should be suspicious that this was a setup by somebody. It was certainly my first assumption, at least first suspicion, that it was a setup by Trump, because cui bono, whom does it benefit but Trump? It's benefited him enormously. But I got to say, and I have the pictures on my site, when you look at Trump's ear and you look at the incredible photo at 8,000 frames a second, the New York Times reporter, of the bullet whizzing by Trump's head. If Trump's ear was hit by a bullet, and if that bullet is whizzing by Trump's head, then that was not a setup. I mean, that guy, whoever was shooting at Trump, was trying to kill him and almost did. There's a millimeter angle of his head that makes a difference between clipping the ear and blowing your brains out. So it's probably not a setup by Trump. Could be just a disaffected loner kid. You look at that now. I have the images in my article again. There's a section where these two buildings are close to each other, and there's a little kind of structure in between that you can walk over from one to the other. And there's a built-in ladder on that structure. And that structure is kind of hidden by this huge tree. So that's there. And you'll see on my site, they have local news who did interviews with people who said, yeah, he was going from one roof to the other. So he was obviously probably got up on that structure. But then you got to ask yourself, so this kid was 52 miles away. Did he case this place out beforehand and find this structure? Did someone tell him about it? Oh, was he just wandering around with his rifle for hours until he kind of luckily stumbled upon it? It's a perfect spot to climb up. You can't be seen for a while. So it's a bizarre situation. There are a lot of unanswered questions about this. If he did this himself, who knows? I don't know what his politics are, what his... in fact, my wife just told me she saw something on Twitter now that there are all kinds of Trump signs in his yard. I don't know what the heck is going on.
And it has this. Did he wander around with a gun? I mean,
that's what I'm saying.
Your shirt.
This was a long gun. This was not something he had in his pants.
The gun.
It's how long was he there before he found this place, or had he cased it out, or had someone else told him about it? These are real questions. So the other setup question, of course, is that some deep state faction that was anti-Trump, they said, who's the guy? I have it in my article. big donor said, the donors can't just let this happen. They got to put a bullet out on Trump.
Yes.
Someone's got to hit him. So that was said. So, this could be that. I wouldn't doubt it one bit. I'm a big fan from day one of Kennedy and JFK and RFK. And I mean, one has to realize they have fooled people about this. The Sirhan example is the great example. If this was a deep state setup, it was a masterful Sirhan type misdirection. And people should understand that was an incredible misdirection. I saw it. People saw it. Oh, he shot him. And he did shoot somebody. He did shoot Kennedy, but Sirhan did not kill RFK. That's a fact. And if you don't know that, that's because the misdirection worked. Anyway, so I don't know what's going on. It's going to take us a while to find out. We may never find out, just like we haven't found out about Kennedy or Sirhan. So but the fact is, best not miss.
That's the other part that we got to go to, and that is, okay, the shooting is, as you said, we don't have answers, but there's questions, and there is a historical context. See, that's the important thing. You can't call me a crazy conspiracy theorist if I have a historical context. If I can look in this country and say, this is a country. Let's face it, it's obvious. They killed Martin Luther King. A guy just came out a year or two ago on his deathbed, a black guy. He was a New York City police officer and said, yeah, I work with the FBI. They killed Malcolm X, right? They killed on and on and on. They killed the Kennedys. They killed every damn body that got in their way, right? So to think that they would kill Trump when they basically said they were going to kill Trump, when David Aronovich, July 1st, tweeted, a guy from the BBC, tweeted, Biden should just murder Trump. That's what he tweeted. He should murder Trump. Yeah. So for us to say perhaps they murdered Trump, it's not really crazy, because they said, I was in law enforcement, I was in investigations, and I remember an instance where a guy got murdered, and what we found was some text messages that said, "I'm going to kill you." It wasn't hard to figure out who killed the guy. Threatening text messages. Well, excuse me, the guy was messing with a stripper, and the stripper had a girlfriend. And the girlfriend had been threatening the guy, and she ended up killing him, right? Shooting the guy, right? But I mean, come on. We looked at it. Yeah, leave my girlfriend alone. I'm going to kill you. I think we have a suspect, right? So we got a bunch of people saying you should kill Trump, murder him, shoot him, put a bullet in him. And now we're crazy people because we think they did exactly what they said they were going to do. It's not. But anyway, so you hit the big one, man. Okay, it is what it is. We may never know. You shoot at the king, you better get the king. They didn't hit him. What now, Jim Kavanagh?
Well, now Trump comes out with this other incredible photo where he's fist pumping with a bloody face under the flag, and it's one of the great political photographs of all time. It cements him as effectively the presumptive incoming president, and he's going to be treated like that in the United States and around the world. People are presuming he's going to be the president. He's the incoming president. You're going to see even Democratic donors moving over to the Trump column. They're not, they're going to say, what the heck? We got to start getting our voices in, and we got to start making our claims for, our piece of the pie. And because the donors really, they're not really attached to the parties. They float around wherever they think is going to get the most. They're going to get the most, and they've got to start going to Trump. Look, so it's almost impossible to conceive how he could be beaten. Certainly not by Biden. Look, this is a disaster for the Democrats and for Biden. I don't know what they're going to do, because Biden can't run the country. He can't pretend to run the country anymore. He cannot pretend to be able to campaign the way Trump is. Look, Trump now, and he's got a 39-year-old vice president who's very smart and very telegenic and is going to talk. Biden can't compete with that. What Trump showed at that moment, in fact, was that he's an old guy. No question about it. He may be having problems himself, but he's up there. He gets up. He goes down. Biden couldn't even get down the steps unless Jill was there to help him. So you saw the difference.
Biden falls down, and they don't even have to shoot him.
Yeah, I know.
He's just walking. Oh, wham!
So look, I just don't know what the Democratic Party and this is for the country. But what we've learned again, they've admitted flat out the Democratic, I think Adam Smith is his name or something, came right out and said Bernie can't complain about the elites working against him because the elites are the ones who put Bernie in place. It
You
was
mean
the elites who came in.
you said Bernie. I think you meant put
But
Biden in place.
Biden in place. And
Yeah.
the reason we put him in place was not because he was we thought he was the guy who could defeat Trump, but because he was the guy who could defeat Bernie, because Bernie was winning and we didn't want Bernie to win. So the Democratic, and I have an article about this called The Democrats' Painful Suicide, in 2020, when everybody, I said it, mainstream media said it, Biden looked like he was starting to have serious cognitive difficulties and he was getting angry, and he was that at that moment, in order to defeat Bernie Sanders and the progressive soft left social democratic programs and policies that he represented, Medicare for all, in order to defeat that, they anointed Biden with Obama in the lead. The elites and the donors, they got together and they said, we got to go with Biden to defeat Bernie Sanders. And they knew they were getting spoiled goods and it was going to get worse, but they did it. And now it's coming back to haunt them, and it's blowing up in their faces, and it's poison pill that they gave themselves, and they don't, what can they do with it? Biden is obviously not capable of running the country. He's not running the country. Nobody knows who is. This is an extremely difficult situation and dangerous for the ruling class. They don't want people going around saying, look, the president doesn't run the country.
We're not supposed to know that.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's a fact, but we're not supposed to know it.
That's right. So this is, they almost have to replace him as president. He's going to run the country till January. He's getting worse every day. And as far as the election is concerned, I mean, I had said for years, we've been on the show saying Biden is not going to be the nominee. Now they may be saying, now this is for the first time, I could imagine them saying, who cares? Let him run out. Why go through the rigmarole of trying to replace him? But on the other hand, still, as I'm saying, the donors who were the ones who are going to replace him, because they're the ones who are going to go to Jill Biden, who makes the decisions here about this issue anyway, and say, you got to get out of the race. We're not giving you another dime. And then he'll get out of the race. But the donors now might not care enough to even bother with it. I don't know what's going to happen, but it's a disaster for the Democratic Party that they brought upon themselves by anointing and protecting this guy and refusing to let anybody talk or think about how bad his cognitive situation was for 4 years and attacking the people who did. But it's also a disaster for the country. I mean, we're a laughingstock of the world. Every leader in the world now knows Joe Biden isn't running the country. They know who is. So it's the Democrats have created, they're killing themselves, and they created a disaster for the country.
Let me throw something else at you. That whole liberal complex, you know what I mean? The media, people are looking at them now and saying, you've been protecting this guy for 4 years. And when those of us in the alternative media, those of us who are living in the real world said, hey, he's not quite right, you attacked us. Joe Scarborough, just weeks before, they had told us how great he was. Oh, he's sharp as a tack. Exactly, sharp as a tack. They had articles in the Washington Post, in the New York Times, people that work around Joe Biden talk about he gets up early, he works hard, he's sharp, blah, 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 right? So they were going along in the mainstream media telling him how fine, how wonderful he was, which I at the time argued we know he screwed up, because they wouldn't have to write those articles. But now the mainstream media, Monday morning, they couldn't even have they had to not have Morning Joe on. And they said, well, we're afraid somebody might come on and say something distasteful. I tell you what I think it was. I think the ruling elite hadn't decided what position they were going to take. They hadn't decided. They're like, how the hell are we going to play this? What position are we going to take? Because, Joe Scarborough is a mouthpiece. The ruling elite says, here's the position we're going to take. And Joe Scarborough, and I think they hadn't figured out what to say. And so they said, we're just going to run regular old news and just talk about it. But we're not going to editorialize about it, because the Democratic leadership, et cetera, was still saying, what do we say? How do we? And they still don't have an answer. What the hell are they going to say? Add this. Go back to 2016. They're whining about the SCOTUS, right? Barack Obama had an opportunity to name someone. And I happen to have people tell me in D.C., in Washington, well, he's not going to do it. Early in the process, they said, he's not going to do it. They're going to play that with Hillary. They're going to leave that out there, that he could push it and just say to the Senate, nothing goes through anywhere. I'm not going to sign anything. You know, he could have blocked all kinds of stuff and said, I'm going to get that. He has he could have named the Supreme Court nominee, but he didn't bother. He liked Sid Merrick Garland, whatever the hell he said, right? But he didn't really push it because they wanted that on the ballot to help Hillary win. But she didn't win.
Yeah.
And so Trump got to name a couple of nominees. So even their gripes about the Supreme Court are their own. I mean, think about this. In trying to thwart the people from choosing their own candidate, the whole process has left them now. Where is the Democratic Party right now? Where is this whole liberal, discredited ruling elite right now, Jim?
Well, that's their problem. And to go back to the Supreme Court for a second, let's not forget Clarence Thomas was put on the Supreme Court by Joe Biden. Right. You know, so that was a procedure I watched, and it was, you know, Biden who shepherded him, made sure he got on the court. So where is it? I don't know where the Democratic Party. I think this is, I say, they're in the process of committing suicide. They started it, you might say, originally. We can go back to George McGovern, but certainly with Bill Clinton, where they abandoned the working class and started to abandon that class base. And then it became in 2020, as I say, when they made the decision to anoint Biden and in order to stop Bernie Sanders, not in order to stop Donald Trump, in order to stop the left in the party, they anointed Biden knowing there was a problem. Everybody knew it. And now they're reaping the whirlwind with that. And I don't know what they're going to do about it. Nobody believes them about anything anymore. Biden comes out and said, I'm going to do this if you reelect me, raise the minimum wage, cancel student debt. You could have done all of that. You didn't do it. Nobody believes them anymore. And that's why they're losing among Black people. As you know, I was talking to you a little earlier, a friend of mine, you know, well-connected in the Democratic Party, has Hillary on speed dial, went to a cigar bar in Washington on Saturday, and he went in, and, you know, it's an upper-class cigar bar, you know, we're professionals, and most people there were Black that day, and the ESPN was on, and he said, "What? Let's put on the news. Trump just got shot." And everybody said, "What?" And he started talking to people, and they were all talking about Trump, and he said every person in that place, every Black person in that place told him, we're voting for Trump. And not because of the assassination. That was the decision they had made beforehand. This is a problem. Nobody should, and not because they believe Trump. It's not just, right. You know, it's like the white people who voted for Obama, not because like Obama, because we need something different. And right. Obama promised to be something different. And people now are saying that Joe Biden is incapacitated, and he's been lying to us, and they haven't really done what we don't believe him anymore. So we're going to go for something different, something that's going to screw up the system and mess things up and create new possibilities. You know, it's foolishness. They're not going to get what they want from him either. But this is the problem, that the Democrats are now on the bad end of the seesaw, and they have spent the last 4 years, you know, not doing anything. And Biden certainly has been incapable or unwilling, both probably, to do anything substantive that he promised. And so the Democrats are screwed. But, you know, they're even more screwed because of this fundamental dementia problem and this cognitive problem, because he's supposed to be running the country. So and they have nobody who could they Kamala put up
Harris
against? I mean, Kamala.
That would be you know, if you think about this too, that would be a really, I think they're better off to just go ahead and lose with Biden than they are lose with Kamala, because, you know, they've had to hide her. I don't know if you've heard her talk, but it's terrible, right? Disastrous. And to stick her out there, like, they've had to hide her, because when she tried to run before, she just got worse and worse and worse. She is like Hillary. She's like Hillary. The more you hear her, the less you like her, right? Except she doesn't kill people all the time. But
look, she and Biden were doing terribly in 2020. They were the worst. And
yes,
they picked them in order, because she was a favorite of Wall Street in 2020.
Yes, she was.
They were promoting her,
and a favorite of the Clintons.
Yeah. So they picked them to stop the left. That's what their program was, and still is. That's why they've got themselves in this position now, that they have created the situation in which Donald Trump is going to inevitably become the president again, because they spent their energy defeating the left. And they'd rather, in 2016, they said it, and still today and forever, the Democratic Party would rather have Trump as president than anybody as left, as soft left, even as Bernie Sanders.
And both of you are far to the left. I mean, I'll probably write in the ghost of Hugo Chavez again, for president. That's where I am politically. But the bottom line is, we know who Trump is, but they turned Trump into, the guy just doesn't have, all he needs is a cape and a shield at this point, to be a superhero. They've turned this guy into a superhero for a couple of reasons. One, because of what happened and he got shot. And let's face it, most people believe that the deep state or somebody was behind it. Most people believe that, most people believe that. And you know what? Let me ask you this. If Trump was president and somebody tried to shoot Biden, you think all the Democrats wouldn't say that Trump tried to take him out? Of course they would. So let's not be unreasonable about this. But where is Trump now as far as political capital? What is the chat? Where's Trump and Vance? Where are they as far as you're concerned? What's the situation?
Electorally speaking, they're in a great place. They just have to sit back and hold up that picture, and let Biden talk. Trump understood. He was very smart in the debate. He said, I'm not going to interrupt him anymore. I know shouldn't have done that the last time. Let him talk. This is what I said about Trump. This is what we've been saying about Trump. The Democrats shouldn't have gone after him with lawfare and turn him into a martyr. Let him talk. He's going to say a lot of stuff that nobody's going to like. But instead, they turned him into a martyr. And now he's a real martyr and a heroic martyr who rose from the ashes and put his fist in the air. And so he doesn't, electorally speaking, he's in a great spot. And he's appointed someone as vice president who is smart and articulate, and young and attractive. And so that can't hurt him. I mean, and, he didn't go after, I'm going to try and cover my bases by appointing, Tim Pool or, some black person or, Vivek Ramaswamy, or he said, I'm going to put my program out there. And people at this point respect that, they don't want to see the baloney. Kamala Harris isn't the Joan of Arc of black people in the United States, and everybody knows it. So nobody wants this kind of symbolic representation that doesn't mean anything. He's appointed someone who's got a serious attitude of his own, which I don't like, which, he's a phony. This is phony. Let
me throw something else.
Oligarchic populism again, but he's in good shape. I don't know. And the donors are going towards him. He's going to get money up the wazoo. The Democratic strategy for the election was call him Hitler and fearmonger everybody. They kind of got to back off on that now, and they have nothing positive of their own. So it's very difficult for them to imagine any path for them in this election. Certainly.
Let's think about this too. Pretty frank about the Trump team, right? Trump's getting $45 million a month now. That's what Musk has pledged, $45 million a month, which tells you where this country are when we have people who can't afford to pay their bills. That's what capitalism gives you, doesn't it? And another guy can pay $45 million a month on a lark. Meanwhile, Peter Thiel, that's Vance's guy. Vance is, let's face it, for all he was born poor and blah, 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 and the hills of Ohio, whatever the hell, right? The guy's a venture capitalist, and he's been funded by Peter Thiel. What we have now is simply a different faction of the ruling elite, that kind of younger, libertarian, new tech money kind of guy, a little weird. And now they got their guys in there. You know what I mean? I just think, people are going to be like, oh, we've got Trump and they're going to be something new. And they will be different. And who knows God only knows what's going to happen. But I'm just saying, we just got a different faction of the ruling elite. We got the richest man in the world. That ain't populism, is it?
Well, and he was a defect from the Democratic Party. He used to support Democrats. And so look, this is phony populism. This is, millionaires pretending to be men of the people and women of the people. And JD Vance has a good backstory, like Clinton did, but JD Vance is even worse in the sense that he is now a multimillionaire. He's totally bought, and his patron is Peter Thiel, who's, now selling military AI to Israel and around the world. And as you say, however, he's part of a kind of coterie of people, libertarian tech, on self entrepreneurs, et cetera, et cetera. It's all baloney. And it's unfortunate because, like, the people who I said for 4 years were being fooled by the Democratic liberal progressive pose. Now you got a whole bunch of people, including working people and black people, et cetera, who are going to go. The seesaw is going the other way, and this is the populist pose that's going to drain the deep swamp. Baloney. They are the swamp. Look what Trump was a president for 4 years. He appointed Wall Street people. He appointed neocons. He appointed Pompeo and Bolton. He doesn't have another program. He has a certain little personal differences and instincts that may say, I don't want to go to war here, I don't want to go there. But at the end of the day, he's an American exceptionalist. The way I'm going to stop I'm going to stop these wars is I'm going to stand up and tell them what they got to do, and they're going to do it because I am who I am. And this is nonsense. This is childish, but this is American politics, I'm afraid. And you've got a cult of personality around Trump. You've got the tech entrepreneurial bros around Vance and Thiel, and they're now going to have their day on the seesaw, and they're up until the next one. It is a depressing thing to see. I've seen it a long time in my life. One party fails, and the other party comes in and says, "We're going to do something different," and ultimately, as with Biden, nothing will fundamentally change, and the structures of power and wealth, and the structures that constantly create and intensify the inequality of wealth and the drive towards war and American exceptionalism and imperialism and Zionism certainly are fundamentally intact, and they will be intact under the Trump administration as they were under the Biden administration. Anybody who thinks otherwise, I'm sorry to tell you, is being fooled. I haven't hesitated to tell my liberal friends, you're being fooled. And if you don't think so, and they should have certainly now be at least recognize, and this is the horrible thing, you can't deny you were fooled about Biden. And you can't deny people didn't try to tell you were fooled about Biden. So now I'm going to tell other friends, anybody who might thinks that Trump is going to save them because he's a man of the people, it's baloney.
Yeah, I've been watching, and we'll touch base on everything. I've been watching the Democratic Party, circling the drain for a long time. I feel like, the whole stealing it from Bernie in 2016 made it pretty clear who they were. But when I first started using the word fascist with them, right? When I started using the words authoritarian on them was 2020, and I've gone over this, with about the people on my, certainly in the chat before, the people on this channel. And that is, we had a couple of things. We had, for some odd and strange reason, Fort Detrick shut down all of a sudden in August of 2019, just shut down. They wouldn't really tell us why. They just, like there was some kind of emergency or something. And then we had this mysterious vaping disease that showed up within weeks after Fort Detrick shut down. That was weird. And then the government strangely started preparing for a pandemic when there was no pandemic. And what do you know? A pandemic popped up. Okay, so it seemed obvious to me that something was fishy there. And then and then Biden comes in, and man, I mean, Trump is there, and I didn't like the way things were going, the lockdowns and all of that, but there was some level of pushback. Biden comes in, and it's get the jab. I had a guy from a very liberal county who I've known for years. He may still be Montgomery County, Maryland. And he's the county executive. Been a friend of mine for years. I said, come on my radio show in DC. And basically the discussion was the county council basically was saying, your job or the jab. They were saying for all of these police officers, firemen, all of these people who had gone through all of this that they said were heroes, they were now saying everybody has to get the jab or you're fired. And I thought, man, that's cold-hearted. Man, that's mean. Man, that's brutal. Man, that's authoritarian. And I started getting in 2020 a feel of who it was, who these people were. And I think that period of time fundamentally changed things. But it opened my eyes a lot about these so-called liberals and so-called um, uh, uh, um, um, wise people and educated people, and their doctors and their lawyers and their white collar and their academic and all of that. And it was like they were the worst ones, like they were in a cult. Suddenly, you're an academic, but I can't question anything. When they say something to me, I got to say, yes, sir, we're going to do that. And I'm not allowed to question. And I started getting an idea about why Martin Luther King didn't trust the liberals, why all of these people over the course of years would come to the conclusion, these liberals, they're problematic. But your thoughts on what COVID and what we learned from that period of time, Jim?
Well, as I've said on some of the other shows I did with you, look, I went to the same high school as Anthony Fauci, and I'm on a group, that started before this whole COVID thing, but a kind of a get together email group and Zoom once a week, etc., of my classmates from that high school. And of course, you think you saw worship of Anthony Fauci, nothing like I saw of Anthony Fauci. And I, as you know, took a very skeptical stance towards this, because I've had a skeptical stance about vaccines for a while. And when this came, I saw right away, this is going to be a push to this is all about getting mandatory adult vaccination. And I did a lot of reading on it, a lot of research on it. And I wrote a 14,000 word article about on my Substack, Danger to Society, against vaccine passports. I did a lot of research on this against mandatory vaccination. Okay. That's exactly what you're saying. Firing people from their jobs, kicking them out of school for not taking a drug that's experimental, that does not prevent you from getting infected or from transmitting the disease. There's no scientific argument about that. This is anti-scientific. This is a worship of vaccines. That's harmless magic bullet stuff. Anyway, I passed this around to my classmates, and my God, I mean, the reactions I got from, and these are all smart people. This is a scholarship school in New York City. This is 33 out of 40 of the last state debate championships. And this is, they're smart. They're all professors and lawyers and doctors. And but it was the worst. I mean, the most they don't want to hear it. As you say, it's cultish. I had a doctor at a Catholic hospital say, I hope I see you die in agony from COVID. What is this? I made an argument about mandatory vaccination. And now 3 years later, after I wrote this article, anybody really still think it was right to mandatory vaccinate? They still won't acknowledge it. So it's what happened in COVID was an extreme example of exactly cultish behavior and cultish thinking. We're a member of the good tribe. And of course, everybody, I must have been a Trumper because I didn't want to have mandatory vaccination. Where did this come from? What is the scientific analysis and the ethico-political analysis of these particular vaccinations and of mandatory vaccination have to do with being a Trumper? This came out of nowhere. All of a sudden, this is right wing. To have any kind of skepticism about any kind of vaccine, any other pharmaceutical drug you can have skepticism about, but that's not to endorse mandatory vaccination, firing people from their job. That must mean you're a right-wing Trumper. Where did this come from? This is nonsense. But there's this cultish attitude. We know who's in our cult and who's not. And anybody who says certain things and expresses certain positions, they have to be excluded. They have to be canceled. They have to be death wished, literally, for daring to say things like it's crazy. But this is what we see. And we've seen, and it's bizarre. It started, I think, in 2016 at least, and it went on through RussiaGate and through COVID. And anybody who had any doubts or serious rational skepticism about RussiaGate or COVID vaccines or whatever, no. That means you're out of the club. You should be. You're anathema, literally anathema, and you have to get out of here. And you're eligible to be killed. And that's what's been going on. So it's very bizarre, and it's disheartening. Because as I say, these are smart people. Smart people can be very stupid. That's what you learn. educated, smart people who are smart about X, Y, and Z can be extremely stupid about A, B, and C when A, B, and C they've been given marching orders about what you should think about A, B, and C. You're not going to let yourself think otherwise. And this is what we're dealing with across the board. And it's very difficult. It makes it very difficult politically because there are people who have very good attitudes about certain things and very terrible attitudes about others. Both things being very important. It's very important to have the right attitude about COVID vaccine. It's very important, not a trivial thing. And there are a lot of people who don't, but they have the right attitude about other things. It's extremely important to have the right attitude about Gaza and Zionism and Israel. Extremely important to have the right attitude about Ukraine. There are going to be people who have the right attitude about one and not, from my position, importantly, the right. And these are all very important things. But the main thing, as you say, is what we've learned about this is that you have to be able to think independently and not be cultish and be able to say to yourself, maybe I grew up thinking all my life, okay, this is just obvious. Vaccines are the greatest thing since sliced bread. But somebody comes along and tells me I got to take a vaccine, or you're going to fire me. Well, maybe I should think twice about that. Someone comes along and says, I've grown up all my life thinking Judaism and Zionism are the same thing. And well, what am I seeing in Gaza? Wait a minute. And there's so many people doing that over Zionism and Judaism. So many young Jews that's saying, I grew up in a certain way saying Zionism is an integral part of Judaism. Now I'm saying to myself, no, it's not. I don't want any part of this. And I'm a proud Jew. So these things, what we've learned is that you've got to have this kind of epistemological flexibility and openness to be able to question things and do rational, skeptical analysis without getting, without trying to protect what you think is this identity formation that doesn't allow you to give up this attachment to this or that thing. It's very difficult. And it's been the COVID thing was a classic, very deep and still going on example of that. And it makes me depressed to see how people can be so cultish and so attached to things. Their own identity is wrapped up in holding on to this. And no matter what they see and what they hear and what they give, they don't want to hear it. They can't hear it. Literally cannot hear the evidence that you give them. So and
let me say this. I'm going to be honest about something. During COVID, I was a Democrat for years, and then 2016, I walked away, became an independent. Okay. During COVID, I said to myself, I'm living in Maryland. Man, I sure am glad I got a Republican governor. I did. And not that I like the Republican Party. I don't agree with them ideologically. I'm to the left of the Democrats, right? But when I looked at what was going on in California and New York and these bluest of blue states, and the death numbers were not any better there than they were in Florida or places where they weren't wearing masks or doing anything. The death numbers were no different. Sometimes they were worse. And I looked at California, and I used to like to go to California. I'd go to LA, I'd go to Palm Springs and stay there, and I'd go to up north, Oakland, what have you. I wouldn't be caught dead in those places now. They look like a California. I believe, it is my opinion, because I was in California 2018 for like 2 weeks in the summer, hanging out, right, partying, driving a convertible. Oh man, I was having fun, right? Going to the beach. Okay. Couple years later, I have friends that go there all the time. I see pics. It looks like, a third world country in a lot of these people, homeless people. The COVID policies wiped California out. The COVID policies, when they said you can't come out, you can't go to the store, you can't do this, you can't go to the restaurants, they wiped out small businesses, medium businesses. They wiped out everything. And they got people accustomed to staying home, clicking on Amazon, buying it on this.com, that.com. And they wiped out their policies, wiped their economies out. California is garbage. Seattle used to be I used to love to go to Seattle. Beautiful city, Pike's Market, all that stuff. No, thanks. No, thanks. I'm going to go somewhere where I got to step over human excrement to wander around. And I think, people talk about the discussion is the Democratic policies destroyed California or, and blah, blah, the West Coast and these places. To me, it was the Democratic policies. Yes, it was the COVID. I went there just before COVID. Things were pretty good. Not perfect, but pretty good. After COVID, don't go back there, buddy, because I mean, there's homeless tents under every bypass. I mean, COVID wiped their economy out, wiped black businesses out, wiped small businesses out, everything. I mean, our economy can't be the same afterwards. Your thought on the COVID's effect? Not COVID, the policies of COVID, because how many countries, Sweden, Belarus, did nothing. Nothing. But Belarus did nothing. They didn't do math. They didn't do anything. They didn't do nothing. And they had better numbers than us.
Yeah. Well, most of them didn't do nothing. I mean, they isolated the sick and got them out of the way, but you don't isolate everybody in the population. You don't mask up everybody in the population with masks that don't stop the transmission. And even Fauci said this. I 100% will say I have no doubt, and looked into it a lot. COVID policies did more damage medically and socially and politically than COVID did. Okay. I'm convinced they killed more people than COVID did, both the policies and the vaccines, because part of COVID policy was not to allow doctors to use the drugs they had on hand against COVID, to try them out, to try out protocols, to try out drugs. This was incredible. They were preventing doctors, firing them, losing their license if they tried out drugs that they knew would work against antiviral, and it was crazy. So and certainly the masking of kids, the locking down, the closing of schools, the antisocial, the businesses, as you say, 40% of black businesses were closed. Everything. This was like having a war that was damaged the country for 2 years, and people do not want to recognize how bad this was. So, and again, you couldn't talk about it. You couldn't object to it. You couldn't express the slightest skepticism about it. And nobody now wants to. This is part of the problem when people do things and they take positions that are obviously, in hindsight, terrible, ridiculous. You let yourself get scammed and fooled. You let yourself believe that Joe Biden was okay. You let yourself believe that everybody should be fired if they didn't take a experimental medicine that didn't prevent transmission of disease. People don't want to go back and say, my God, how did I do that? That was really bad. I got to understand my own thinking, how I could get to that point. No, they said, no, well, I just forget about it. Let's move on. Or I was right. I was actually right then. Maybe there's something wrong that we now know something. No. We all knew then. We told you then, and but this is the problem. People are hanging on, as I say, to things that was part of their identity. If I'm the one who's wearing a mask, if I'm the one who's taking the vaccine, then I'm a good person. And the people who aren't are selfish. They're not. They're selfish right-wingers. What are you talking about? I made a judgment about a medical product. I made a judgment, and I understood something about it. How did I know? Because I actually went and had the information from doctors and scientists all around the world. I didn't depend. My identity wasn't wrapped up in believing my fellow high school alumnus or in the 3 or 4 experts that were given to me on television. I told I must believe. My identity is I should find out what's wrong. I should look into what's right. I have the capability, fortunately, of understanding things and doing some research, and I did. But everybody, this is another attitude. So yeah, I think definitely the COVID episode, which in some ways isn't over, it's going to happen again. It's going to happen again. And there are going to be a lot of people again. You have to take the drug. You have to do this. You have to do that. I mean, I think there'll be a lot more pushback about it now, but they're going to try it again. And but that attitude, the whole attitude about RussiaGate, COVID, Biden, we are going to pretend that we are going to cling on to what we think is the right attitude to have. That is the attitude that's the progressive attitude, or whatever word you want to put on it, the
good guys.
They we're the good guys. That makes us the good guys, essentially. Yeah. And that's the problem. That's the deep problem that I don't know how we're going to get over it.
Well, and if you think about it, to me, RussiaGate and COVID are inextricably linked, in this way. You believed things because you were part of the group. I don't know how many times I've asked people about, oh yeah, Trump was a puppet for blah, 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 blah. And, one thing I love to do with people, and that is feign ignorance. And I'll say, really, I don't understand. Tell me about it. Huh? And when you ask them, They don't have anything. They know that Trump was a Russian bot and he was controlled by Putin and all these kind of things. But when you ask them for the details, they have barely a superficial understanding of what they're even saying. I believe it, and my people believe it, and therefore, and I've had people say, "Well, you've got to take I remember this. You have to take the shot because for you to protect your family." And I would say, "Well, does it stop me from passing it on?" Oh, yeah. They said yes. I had people that said yes.
Yeah.
It's safe. And I brought this, as you know, I resigned from the National Board of Directors from the ACLU because they wrote an op-ed that said it's safe and effective. And I said, but I just went to Pfizer's website and I sent a screenshot into them, and it says, we're still doing research to find out the long-term safety and blah, 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 blah. And I said, why would you, the ACLU, write an article and in the article specifically say it's safe and effective when the company that makes it says we're still testing to determine the long-term safety of it? So what do you know that Pfizer doesn't know? And they just kind of, I'm out of here. You people are out of your minds. Again, when you talk about the board of directors for the ACLU, you got lawyers, you got law professors, you got academic. It was academia, but they were the bluest of the Hillary blue, Democrat blue. You know what I mean? What's interesting, what do you think of this? These people were very educated, went to the finest schools, a lot of very wealthy people, very knowledgeable people, heads of, we're talking about the board of directors for the ACLU, a nonprofit. Last year I was there, we brought in 300 million in 1 year. 300 million in 1 year. It's not a small organization, very powerful, knowledgeable people from all over the country involved, right? On the board. These people were stupid as a bag of ice. They believed that stuff. They believed RussiaGate. They believed it. They didn't know anything about, a lawyer is supposed to be able to clearly articulate their point. They knew nothing about their points, and they believed them to their very heart and soul to the point where they get mad at you. I literally saw a woman who was an attorney say, I wanted to punch my husband because he's not voting for Hillary. She would have beat her husband to a pulp because he says he wouldn't vote for Hillary. This is the mentality of these people that I started to learn about. But yet, some guy who's a Republican who fixes transmissions doesn't have a lot of education. He works hard. He gets his hands greasy, comes home, goes on a computer, reads about the jab and says, hey, I don't like that. Doesn't make sense. Reads about something else, RussiaGate, and said, well, that's been proven false. And somehow we have to discount that guy, even though he has evidence and can support his positions. But these other people are, they're the intellectual and academic elite. That's what it comes down to. Like, this is my position inside society. I'm a member of the intellectual, academic, maybe financial elite. So my positions are somehow more valid than the poor little guy who works on the transmission, even though he actually researched his. That's it came down to me in a way like class snobbishness and class warfare. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, it certainly was that. I mean, one of the great moments in that was there was an incident that was filmed on TV where Fauci and Birx or someone was going around Washington, D.C., offering everybody take the shot. And they came on this young black guy who came out and said, I'm not taking that shot. You don't know enough about this. You don't know what's going on. And they were like, he was starting to say things to them that was correct. And they just backed away. Okay. But so you see this all the time that, and this is horrible. They put out this notion, you get ridiculed for doing your own research. I mean,
yes,
that's learning something. I mean, I like learning things that are new, I like finding out that something I presumed was true for all my life, maybe it's not so true. I got to find something new. I kind of like that, but most people don't. And they attacked you for doing your own research, for reading, for going. And are you a doctor? No, I'm not a doctor, but I'm capable of. I have to make my own decisions about my own health, whether I'm a doctor or not. And I'm capable of listening to doctors and reading science. I have what the internet gives me is access to a lot of junk, but also access to the best minds in history today. And I can find out And I can, people can make distinctions. Some people are going to go down the wrong path. Some people are going to go down the right path. But that's a good thing that you're able to do that. And so this idea that people were ridiculed for trying to learn something. And as you say, Pfizer, they had the largest fine ever for fraud, for medical fraud, essentially for their drugs. I was supposed to take the word of Pfizer, and it wasn't, as you say, they weren't even saying it. What anybody who was a leftist should have and could have seen right away is this is a scam. We have to suspect, at least, that this is a way for Pfizer, for the big pharma, which every leftist understands is one of the most horrible and corrupt industries in the world, big pharma, to make billions of dollars by forcing people to take vaccines that they're going to get the governments of the world to pay for. And that's what it was. And so you have to, the idea that I'm doing a right-wing thing by suspecting that and then looking into it to see whether it's true or not. And in fact, Pfizer and all these, Moderna, they all said, we're not sure how this is going to work. We've never used this before in human beings. They never used mRNA technology before in human beings like this. And it's terrible. And it turns out it's terrible. Their own clinical trials showed higher all-cause mortality among the vaccinated group than the unvaccinated group. A drug isn't good if you take it, it prevents you from getting disease X, but it makes you die of heart attack. So you got to look at all-cause mortality as the endpoint of studies like this. Anyway, the point was, this is part of the kind of epistemological crisis. People were being told, you can't learn anything. As Jimmy Dore was saying, I'm going to buy a car. I'm going to look up, see what's going on with it. No. Are you a car salesman? You got to listen to the salesman.
You're not a mechanic.
This is what it was with these drugs, and this is what it is with every. You got to listen to the experts that we have told you are the appointed experts, are the good experts, are the ones who have the authority to speak. And whether it's about drugs, whether it's about politics, don't go anywhere else. And that's crazy. That's just anti-scientific, anti-rational. It's cultishness.
Let me now let's go here. So these people were looking out for our best interest to make sure that we were safe, and they were the good guys, weren't they? And next thing you know, we're arguing this. You guys are funding and supporting people who are walking around with the iconography of the Third Reich, right? We're like, what the hell with this Azov thing? And they're like, John Stewart's pinning badges on Azov guys. They're bringing guys here to Congress, Azov, Nazis. Some friggin' guy from the Waffen SS stands up in Canada. Yay! He gets a rousing round of applause, right? And we're like, well, that doesn't look positive. Perhaps, you guys are going in the wrong direction. And then that was bad enough. And then they start committing a damn genocide. And I hate that, I have telegrams sometimes because I get up in the morning and I start, reading the news and going over things like that. And I look at a telegram, and every day there's some pictures that pop up, and they've blown kids' limbs off, amputees. I'm reading stories. Yes, I saw a toddler blown to pieces, crawling, and just suddenly died. And I'm like, it's a horror story beyond imagination. And these same damn liberals are like, now have joined these so-called conservatives who said, oh, yes, we're against censorship, except when it comes to Zionism, right, in Israel. And now all of these people that were supposedly the good guys, they go from hugging Nazis to supporting a genocide. And these so-called fake conservatives, they're like, go from we must stop censorship. We need to be able to talk about whatever we want. We need people to have safe space. Now they need safe spaces on college.
Yeah.
And now they're opposed to people pushing back against the government. Pure madness, Jim.
It's horrible. Look, this is for the Ukraine situation is absolutely true. The Americans in 2014 instigated a coup against the democratically elected government. No question. The OCSC, or Organization of Security Council and Cooperation in Europe, said that election was great. Yanukovych won the election. They overthrew the government, a democratic elected government, with Nazis, and it's not neo-Nazis. These are people who admire Hitler, okay? And they are political groups that fought with Hitler and on behalf of Hitler and the Germans in World War II and carried out mass executions and genocidal policies in Ukraine and other and Poland in World War II. So those were the political forces that the Americans allied with. And that's why it always drives. That's why I'm wary. I'm very wary about the way the word fascist is used. Because anybody in the American context, any American liberal or leftist who wants to say they're anti-fascist, the first people they should be attacking, the first people should be going after, are Obama and Biden, who brought fascists, Nazi fascists, into power in Europe for the first time since World War II. As far as what's going on in with Zionism, and yes, Zionism is a Jewish supremacist ideology that grew out of the same ideological roots it was that the fascists in the early 20th century grew out of, ethno-nationalism, etc. And look, this is what we're watching today, and it is beyond belief to me. It's horrible. I cry almost every day. You know, I saw today. I couldn't believe it. There's a category of people in the Gaza now, a significant category of toddler amputees. Now, this is a horror. This is, and orphan toddler amputees. This is now a significant part of children in Gaza. And this is deliberate. The Israelis are deliberately killing. Their policy is to kill and expel every Palestinian in Gaza and in the West Bank now. And just as they did in 1948. Their policy was they killed or expelled 750,000 Palestinians to get a Jewish majority that they could rule as the colonial masters over the non-Jews, the Palestinian Arabs. And that's what they want to do in Gaza. And that's what they're doing. And they say they're doing it. They're proud they're doing it. From the commanders to the soldiers, they put out videos and TikToks and saying, we're going to kill all these Palestinians. And they're daring the world, watch us. And they're telling themselves, don't be afraid of this. Don't be ashamed to do it. Kill them all. And what the program is, it's not to defeat Hamas. It's not to get the hostages out. It's to kill or expel most of the Palestinians in Gaza. And they're telling the world, you're going to watch us kill them or you're going to take them. And eventually they're going to take them. Palestinians will leave. They'll be voluntarily and forcibly emigrated. Because what family wouldn't leave if they get a chance to go to Canada and save the lives of their children? So it's a horrible ethnic cleansing genocidal situation. So I don't use the word genocide, and I tend to avoid that fascism, genocide. But this is horrible. This is something I'm ashamed as an American, as a citizen of the world. The world is allowing this to happen every day now for 9-10 months. When this first started, we wouldn't have thought this would be able to go on for a week or 2 weeks before the world would have stopped it. The first time the Israelis hit a hospital, it was like, oh, Israelis wouldn't have done that. They said, oh, we don't send rockets to hospitals. Now, every day, every hospital is destroyed, every school. Every day there are not just one, but now 2 or 3 massacres a day. 10 children having their limbs amputated per day without anesthetic. This deliberately targeting women, children, killing doctors at home with their families, waiting till they get home so they can kill the whole family. Journalists, the same thing. Teachers, the same thing. This is genocidal ethnic cleansing, and the United States government is part of it. They're not complicit in it. They're not watching it. They're totally complicit in it. They're part of it. It couldn't happen without them. And that's why I really have very little patience for any of these politicians who are part of this, and they all are. And it's a horrible thing. It's hard to say. I'm living in a world where this is happening and nobody's stopping it.
Your thoughts, yeah, and to tie COVID with this, RFK Jr. Here's a guy that during COVID questioned COVID with legitimate questions. He was very good. He wrote a book on Fauci, and he got criticized by the liberals, but the truth was Fauci never filed anything, never said a word, wouldn't talk about the book, which led me to believe that it was all true, right? He exposed a lot of things. He questioned a lot of things. I was like, man, this guy's pretty sharp. He's on the ball. Then he said he's running for president. And at the time, I'm sure you were too, like, I'll look into this, okay. And he was going on Jimmy Dore, doing all of these things, and he's questioning empire. And I'm like, okay. Then comes October 7th. and he's wandering around with this crazy rabbi Zionist who's like owns porn or something, and daughter or something sells sex objects. I mean, just a madman, a madman. And Shmuley, is that the guy, Rabbi
Absolutely,
Shmuley,
yeah,
whatever
yeah,
the hell,
absolutely.
right? And he's just saying, and I'm like, you don't have an excuse, because we know you can research things. We know you understand. So you know what's going on. The first thing I thought to myself was, but I think he may know why they killed his dad. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, he may be like, yeah, guys, but if I take the wrong position here, there'll be a guy climbing up a ladder at one of my rallies, laying on top of a building, and the Secret Service won't see him, because a lot of that goes around these days, Jim.
Well, yeah, Kennedy is a great example. Look, my friend in Washington, who was very close to his family, gave him my anti-vaccine mandate article to read, and we had a correspondence via email, and he was very appreciative of it. Said he was going to have me on his podcast, but didn't. But and I wrote an article about him, RFK Jr.'s chances, where you and I'm telling him essentially in the article, look, what you did with vaccines, because as I say, I've been skeptical of vaccines, and I've looked at his work about vaccines for a long time, and he's right. And he bucked and went up against precisely this thing that everybody's supposed to accept and just take for granted. And I did for most of my life. And he went in it, and he wouldn't let himself be back down, and he did it courageously. And it was this hard thing to do. Now people are coming around to this in another way because of COVID. And then I see he's standing with he's doing exactly the opposite with the Zionists. Here's this other thing that you're not supposed to question, that's supposed to be a sacred object, that you can't, and you're doing, when Roger Waters, when he started, first he supported Roger Waters, and Roger Waters came out against Zionism. I said, you are going along with the canceling of Roger Waters for being skeptical and critical of this supposed sacred position that nobody can question, just like you were canceled for questioning vaccines. And so this is one of these examples of a guy, I'm not ever going to vote for anybody who has this attitude to Zionism and Israel he has. And as you say, I said, he can't possibly be saying these things. Can he possibly believe these things he's saying about the history of Israel and Zionism, when clear these are the ways it actually went, not the way Shmuley is telling him? I don't know. But so here's a perfect example of someone who has a very good attitude and a courageous attitude, in my book, about something that was very important, but has, the most conventional and most frozen attitude about something which is extremely important. And you can't claim to be to be someone who's going to keep us out of wars if you support Zionism, because you're going to get into a war with Iran. That's what they want. That's a war. There's a war against the Palestinian people. So you're not anti-war. So, but this is with a lot of people. There are people who have very good positions on some things and terrible positions on others. You have to make alliances that are, crazy at some times, single issue alliances. Look, a lot of people, I support abortion rights. A lot of people support abortion rights who aren't going to support any of these other things, I think, but I have to stand with them on that and challenge them on, why don't you stand with me on these other things? That was an interesting thing about abortion rights that I wrote about, because, bodily autonomy. Oh, no. And you've weakened your position on abortion rights because of that in a very powerful way.
My body, my choice, right? Yep. Remember that?
My body, my choice. That was a powerful slogan. That's a good slogan. And plus that, well, wait a minute. Is Justin Trudeau or Gavin Newsom any worse for not letting a woman come into their polity if they're not vaccinated to get an abortion than the governor of Texas not letting women get an abortion, leave their polity to get an abortion? You see what I'm saying? So if they're for other reasons, so you got yourself they got themselves people who were supporting abortion rights but dropped bodily autonomy, because that's what you have to do when you support mandatory vaccination. Bodily autonomy goes out the window, and you got to be able to defend that if that's your position, but you got to recognize that is your position. So anyway. But the thing about RFK is an important thing, because he had a chance to Gay a lot of support, but he lost any support on the anti-Zionist left and on the left. Zionism is a form of racism and ethnic supremacism, and you can't be against. It's like I'm anti-racist except for Zionism. This is progressive except Zionism. This is Jim Crow at best in the Middle East, and the great.
Well, we're gonna. I got one last thing because I see we're running out of time, but I did want to ask you about this controversial issue. Some people don't want to talk about it, but let me ask you about this because what we're talking about is we're in a situation now where a lot of us are just shaking our heads. You know what I mean? It's like you're committing a genocide. You are saber rattling with the most powerful nuclear power, Russia, in the world, with a powerful military, with the most powerful economic power in the world, which also has a powerful military. You're trying to get people together and go start wars with them. You're doing all of this craziness. But I want to ask you about this. This is a cultural issue. This other thing that the liberals are into, there's any number of facets to it. There's let's have what do they call them? The whatchamacallits that read to kids, drag queen story hour that read to kids, right? Mm-hmm. That they push, and I say this, I believe that everybody should have an equal expectation of rights, right? Gay people shouldn't be mistreated or anything like that. I have friends and a family member that's gay, an extended family member that I love dearly. I'm not anti-gay or hate gay people or whatever, right? But there is something malicious about the way the Biden administration uses the whole rainbow flag thing. It's like, well, we have to go do this or that. We're going to sanction countries. Why? Because they're not friendly enough to the LGBTQ people. We've got to go after our enemies. Not only their enemies and their adversaries, they go after that that. Your thoughts on this cultural weird thingy that's going on with the liberal class of, not like a person like me who just says, leave gay people alone. Let them live their friggin' lives. Why you got to screw with them? You know what I mean? Why do you have to put them out front? Why do you have to make them, just leave them alone. Let them live their lives. But there's something else going on here. You're trying to overthrow a country. Blinken literally now has rainbow flags around the world and all of these embassies. But inside the embassies are a bunch of CIA agents who are trying to overthrow the damn government. You know what I'm saying, Jim?
Yeah, well, they did that great CIA advertisement from someone who was gay or something, or Latina or whatever. So, it's identity politics in service of capitalism and in service of imperialism. And they want people fighting about these things. Look,
right.
This is, first of all, I saw the change, radical change. It was a radical change from the attitudes towards gay people and homosexuals in my lifetime. Yeah. And it's wonderful. I think the gay liberation movement is one of the most wonderful things I've seen, drag queens. I mean, people were coming from my friends from Western Pennsylvania would come to New York. Well, let's go to the drag show. Let's go to the drag bars. The drag queens are wonderful. I mean, everybody had a good time with drag, but there's a level of now something about it. Nobody wants the sexualization of children in general, yes. Drag queens or not. I mean, I don't understand. I don't think 5th and 6th grade children should be going to strip shows and putting money in for whether for drag queens or women or men or gay men or straight men, or this is kind of weird. Why is that being put out into the culture? Pushing the idea that children have to be exposed to everything and have to become part of all this kind of sexualized discourse in a way that's very bizarre. So I think there's a level of, this is the kind of arguments they want us to be having over trans rights and drag queens and, how sexualized children's books should be in the school library. And there are real issues.
I can make a quick comment.
Yeah.
Look, When I was a young man in my 20s, did I go to some strip bars? Yes, I did. Did I probably date some strippers? Yeah, okay, yes, I did. I was a young man in my 20s. I wasn't 9. I wasn't
Yeah.
8. I wasn't 12. You know what I mean? If somebody said, well, a bunch of these strippers who are scantily clad are going to come down to, the elementary school and read to 8 years old, they're women. But
Yeah.
scantily clad skippers, clad strippers are
Yeah.
going to wiggle around in front of the 8-year-old boys. I'd say, no, 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 no,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
That's inappropriate. Kids shouldn't be. It doesn't have to do. So now you have scantily clad drag queens.
Yeah.
It's not to me that they're drag queens.
Yeah.
It's a sexualized thing. It's
Yeah.
strippers, particularly when you have the whole Epstein Island stuff and all. That kind of really gives you the heebie-jeebies and gives you the impression that maybe there's some people out here that are looking at children in a way that isn't exactly healthy, that we wouldn't be comfortable with, maybe sniffing their hair, not to disrespect Joe Biden. But my point being, even then, to me, it's not even just that they're drag queens. I wouldn't want female strippers half naked doing the same damn. What's this thing with sexualizing children? And you see these pictures, and the parents are like smiling, and they're like wiggling around, and they're like a little 5-year-old kid putting $1 in there, and you see, and I'm like, what the hell?
Yeah.
And then when I say I think things wrong with it, like, oh, there's nothing wrong with drag queens. I said, I didn't say there's nothing wrong with drag queens. If you're 25, you can make a decision to go, whatever. You can go to Tijuana and see donkeys do things if you want to, God forbid. If you're 25, not if you're 5 or 6.
Yeah. Look, this is and the other, because what they do is this is something that parents are going to object to. And then they create the fights in the school boards, and parents are going to object to that. Any parent, but Black parents object to it. Muslim parents object to it. Christian parents object to it. Atheist parents object to it. I would object to it. A 8, 9, 10-year-old kid going to a strip club, having a stripper, whatever, as you say, of whatever sexuality. It's something that's inappropriate. And then you have the fights and the political fights, and you create legislation, and these. I don't know. I think this is it's put into play by activist groups who think they should have their issue out in the front all the time, and it's put into play by politicians and corporate elements and donors who want to present themselves as the banana republic, not the Benetton, rainbow personality in the world, and DEI stuff. So this is a level of, you've gone from civil rights and from real struggles for liberation of people who were marginalized and oppressed in serious ways to identity politics in the service of capitalism and imperialism. And, it's what Adolf Reed says, the idea is that if we have the right proportion of, 12% of the capitalists are Black and X percent of them, then we're okay. Now you got to include the trans people and the drag queens. But this is silly. This is not an analysis of society. It's not a question of social problems, and it's not a way of dealing with culture either. You have to respect people's cultures. I don't like countries that make laws against homosexuality, whether it's Iran or an African country or Saudi Arabia. But as you say, the ones we're going to attack are the ones we're attacking for other reasons. We're going to use that as an excuse. Right. So, and we have to respect that we cannot go around the world changing all those policies, even if we'd like to. They have their own cultures that are thousands of years old, and you say what you feel about it. You be an example of what you think is a good thing about it, but you can't be militaristic about it. So, and you're not really. They use that opportunistically for whatever. And that's why I think what's happening. It's happening internationally, and it's happening domestically too. They're using these issues opportunistically to create some kind of appeal that they think will help them politically or economically.
Yeah, a couple of things. It's an excuse to go after their enemies. It's another thing to weaponize, and then ultimately, it's another way to divide the working class. It's
Absolutely.
a one of the things I believe the ruling class wants is to keep us fighting amongst each other.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you disagree with something, you're a Trumper, you're a white supremacist. I literally had people call me a white supremacist, and I'm like, you haven't seen, they hadn't seen my picture, that was like online. Well, you're just another Trumper, a white supremacist. I'm like, well, boy,
Okay.
my ancestors are going to be really shocked to know that I'm a white supremacist. Not that they're
Yeah.
not white people in my ancestry, but there's all of them ain't white. I'll just put it like that,
Mhm.
But it becomes, if you don't agree with the things that we have come together to say this is what we're going to work on, this is what we believe in, we attack you, and we attack you with very particular. Oh, let's not forget, in 2016 they called Bernie and Trump both sexist.
Yep.
They called Bernie and Trump, that Bernie was a racist. Remember that? He was a racist. They loaded up the things for
Yeah.
anybody they don't like. If you're on the left, if you're on the right, wherever you, again, we got my issues with Bernie, but my point being this: they only got a couple of plays. And no
Yeah.
matter, it's like, when I was in high school, a guy I used to play with, I played basketball in high school and community college, but I played with a lot of lefties. And one thing I used to always find about a lot of lefties, they could only go left, but if you let them go left, they'd kill you. You know what I mean? If you let them go left, they'd never stop you. But a lot of times they only had a left hand, they couldn't go right. They only had one. And that's the way these people are. They only got a couple of moves, and they just use the same ones over and over and over. And it ends up, you and I have learned things like this. Look, if a person is a MAGA, remember Biden the other day, the MAGA Republicans want to destroy America. What I found was this: well, there's a lot of MAGA Republicans that are very reasonable about COVID and the jab and things.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of MAGA Republicans that are very reasonable about certain things that I should align with them and say, hey, I agree with you, man. We need to do something to stop that. And when there's an area that we don't disagree, it's okay, as Abraham Lincoln talked about, to say, well, we don't agree, let's go our separate ways. But I don't see MAGA Republicans as some evil guys or libertarians as some evil guys. You know what I see them as? Working class people. My view is we got to see people through the lens of economic class, because as I've said, I've been around really, really rich people. And you know what? They view the world strictly through economic class. I heard someone I used to be at Fox News. I heard someone at Fox News literally in 2016 refer to Donald Trump as a traitor to his class.
Yeah.
And this was a rich person.
That's what yeah, of course. I mean, I'm a Marxist, so I believe in class, fundamental class analysis. And you're right. As Jimmy Dore said about the organizing the union, the Smalls who organized, Christian Smalls who organized the union, the Amazon, you organize a union, you don't go to the workers and say, what do you think about this? And what do you think about that? You don't go with the checklist of attitudes and get the people together who have the right attitudes with the things on your checklist. You go and you say, I don't care what attitude you have. We need to get a raise. We need to get better working conditions. We need to get time off. We need to get medical care. And you don't start, this is materialism 101, communism 101, Marxism 101. You don't start with people's attitudes. People have 1,000 different attitudes. You start with their material interest and you make alliances and solidarity based on material interest. You don't go and start with, what's your attitude about gay people? What's your attitude about COVID? What's your attitude about, you go and you say, you want to get a raise? You want to get health care? Let's figure out how to do it. And you build solidarity on the basis of material interest. In that context, then you have people you're working with and you're going to have discussions. And you then might have might have the ability to change people's minds about attitudes because they trust you, because you're working with them on something that's important. But if you come in with the attitude, first, I got to find out what you think about gay people or black people or, polka dot people or trans people or, COVID or vaccines, then you lost because you're starting out with division. There's always going to be thousands, because that's what people have been educated, that is educated by the capitalist system, and which is mainly by the media, to have crazy, stupid attitudes about a lot of things and foolish attitudes, let's put it that way, about a lot of things. But they all know where they're getting screwed on their paycheck. They all know whether they can get medical care. They all know that they have credit card debt that's killing them. Okay. And we could go in. I would, and this is what Bernie was called a racist because he wanted universal programs rather than, targeted against black people. I would, if I were running for president, one of the first things I'd do is say, we're going to pass a law. There used to be laws. I remember as a kid, usury. You couldn't charge people 15, 20% interest. The United States government should have a law preventing anybody from charging more than 2% over the federal. That could happen tomorrow. There's nothing that could stop that. And everybody in the country would say, oh, yeah, I'm not going to go and say, tell me what you think about trans people. And then maybe I'll go along with you about, no, you just do it. You go for that attitude. They should have a minimum wage that's consistent with the inflation and the standard of living. It should be like $25, $21. And there's nothing that could stop them from doing that. But they rather have you fighting about gay people or trans people or black people or Trump or blah, 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 blah. I live in a Western PA where there's Trumper, big signs of Trump, people I interact with every day. They're very nice people. They're good people. They work, they do things for you. They work hard. They have a small shop. They work on cars. They paint your house. They mow your lawn. They come to you and they help you when they see you're in trouble. I don't know whether, in fact, I don't know if these particular people are voting for Trump or not, but they very well might be. But if I were to start a political movement, I wouldn't be saying, first of all, what's your attitude about Trump? Even Trump? We'd start with that. I'd say, what do we want to do? What do you need in your life? What do we both need? We need to be able to be secure in our homes. We need to be able to get medical care. We need to be able to afford food. Okay, our children need to have good schools, etc. So that's what you do. But if you start out, then what's called the left now is precisely the opposite of the Marxist attitude, which is not materialist, but ideal. This is what I mean, what Marxism means by an idealism. You start out with, what are you thinking about? What's the thoughts you have in your head? And if we agree on those, then we can go further and do something else. And it becomes, before the phony leftist idea of politics is you go to people and make alliances based on what they think. And then maybe first you find out that, and class becomes the last thing. Oh yeah, I'm for the working class too, but I'll get to that after we find out the checklist of their attitudes. Then we'll talk about class issues. It's the other way around. You come in and you say, what is your material interest? What do you understand that Donald Trump, Joe Biden, Elon Musk, you're a fucking ant to them.
Right.
You are close. Whatever you think, you make $100,000 a year, you are closer to a homeless person than you're ever going to be to Donald Trump or Elon Musk. Okay. So let's talk about what you make $100,000 a year. What's your mortgage? What interest rates are you paying? What do you pay to kids to go to school? So even at that level, which is, but what's the median level? Like $60,000, $50,000? There shouldn't be any taxes on 60. There should be no income taxes. They could do it. You know, MMT to do that. But, all these things. So there's a way of talking to people, and it's the exact opposite. From a Marxist point of view, you start out with what's our material interest together. And their material interest is not your material interest. They may have, they're going to come to you and say, you have the same attitude about X, Y, and Z, but that's not your material interest. So anyway, that's
well, let me say this. My dad was a longshoreman, right? And older guy. So way back when he started, he talked about it. They were there was, it was very segregated, right? And you had back then, they called them gangs, right? A group of guys that you work with to unload ships, and you work with this guy all the time. But they were segregated. They had black gangs, they had Irish gangs, they had Italian gangs, they had waspy gangs, and it was hierarchical. Right? The pig iron, which was these heavy iron ores, they take shovels and put it in big buckets. It was so heavy, they had a lot of shovels because they would snap the shovel handles.
Yeah.
Right? And these guys you didn't want no trouble with a longshoreman. These were big, strong guys. They worked hard, right? So during the course of time, it was very racist. It was segregated. Some guys you were a white guy, you might have got better time, better than black guys, or the Irish guy, he didn't get what this guy got. You know how the game was, right? But every so often, the contract ended, and they needed a new contract. And you know what they all did? They all got on the picket line if they needed to
Mhm.
strike. White,
Yep.
black, green. They all carried signs. They all brought big things of water so they could drink and eat in the heat. They all bring food. Their wives would come and bring things. They wouldn't let anybody. They all got together
It's a
and
great
they all
example.
marched. And and those ships had to be unloaded. The amount of money they
Yep.
were losing was unthinkable. They would strike for a few, however many days it was, and they'd call and they'd give them another raise. And the guys, everybody knew the longshoremen made a good living. They worked hard, but they got, and they had great benefits and they had a good life. They got their fair share. They probably should have got more because the ship owners were making so much, but they got their fair share. And so the longshoreman came home because he got together and forgot all of this other stuff. And he came home with able to take care of his family because they put all of this living in a segregated society. But when it came time that they all had to eat, when it came time to sign that contract with their job, they went on it together. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about here. And that is, we got to have priorities.
And, we live in a society now, fortunately, and that's one of the good things about what's happened and the results of the civil rights movement and the results of social integration. Although, socially, it's not all that integrated, but the fact is people work together now. People aren't divided into ethnically and racially exclusive cohorts when you work. And that's a good thing. Then it's precisely people working together where their material interests are obvious and they work on it. That's the basis for real social change. They need you more than you need them. And that's what people don't really understand. That's why you don't look up to people like Donald Trump and Elon Musk. You shouldn't be looking up to them. They need you more than you need them. They're not your heroes. They're not your saviors. They're there at the end of the day to extract wealth that you create. And what you got to do is say, we're going to take charge and not going to worship some entrepreneur or billionaire or whatever. We're going to take charge. And that's what the whole Marxist program is, that the working class should take charge of society, which it doesn't. And the American the so-called democratic system doesn't allow it to. And it's designed in order to preserve the social and political power of the wealthy and to make them more wealthy. And since, 1980, you look at the chart, the rise in productivity and the rise in wages was going together since World War II. Because the unions were strong, because World War II, because we had to work together. And 1980, after the rise in productivity started to go away from the rise in wages. So the wages there's a big gap now between productivity and wages. That's wealth that the working class creates that's being appropriated and extracted and put into the pockets and the private jets of the billionaires who are going around the world and the Elon Musk and the Donald Trumps. And that's what we have to be working on. That's what we should be focusing on. And that's why they gin up these other fights so that we don't focus on that.
Jim Kavanagh, where can everybody find your stuff?
Jim Kavanagh's Substack. It's on the bottom of the screen. I'm on Twitter at @thepolemicist_. And I have a YouTube and Rumble, but I haven't done much on that yet, but I will be doing some more. Go to my Substack.
Yeah, Jim has some great stuff on his Substack too. Make sure you read his articles. A lot. He's been putting out a lot of good stuff for a long time. Dr. Jim Kavanagh, thanks a lot. Certainly appreciate it. Had a great time. And for those who don't know, what happens is Jim and I talk a lot, and this is the conversation that we have on the phone. Yeah. This is like the way we yap and rattle back and forth on the phone. And we just wanted to subject you to this kind of brutality and mistreatment for a change. All right, Jim. We'll talk again. Everybody, don't forget. Share this on all your social media platforms. You see everything sliding across the bottom: Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee and PayPal, all that stuff. If you can support the channel, that's fine. If not, just share it on all your social media platforms. Follow me on Rumble, follow me on Rockfin, Jim Kavanagh Substack. I got my Substack too. Make sure you go over there and follow my Political Superfood Substack. We're out.
Bye-bye.